On July 13th, 2010, a man was walking along a remote dirt road that took him past some abandoned houses in Sunchi Village in Shanghai County, located in China's Shandong province. The man was traveling this route in order to save time, as he was needed in another village for an urgent matter. As he made his way through the rural area, he had to pause a moment because of a horrendous stench. And as he walked, he realized the smell was getting worse and worse with each passing step. He soon found that the source of the smell was an old mechanical well, around 1 foot in diameter. Due to the sunlight, he was able to see something was stuck inside the well. Using a lighter to better discern the object, he recoiled in horror when his light illuminated a pair of human feet. The police arrived alongside the rest of the villagers and rushed to the scene. There, the police encountered their first hurdle. The well was too narrow for the body to be removed. So, after negotiations, investigators had an excavator come in and, with the help of villagers, dismantle the entire well in order to retrieve the body. Luckily, this operation was a success, as the body was retrieved without any further damage being done. The body was that of an adult male. Naked and heavily decomposed, his face had already skeletonized from the elements outside of the well. Initial examinations show that the body was 183 centimeters tall, about 6 feet, and weighed 90 kilograms, around 195 pounds. The body was thought to be between the ages of 30 and 40 years, and medical examiners estimated that he had been deceased for the last 3 months to up to 1 year in the past. The cause of death was blunt force trauma, as he had suffered blows to his head and his face. That observation led the case to being classified as a homicide. The police believed that the murder was well thought out and likely premeditated, as the killer took specific and meaningful steps to make identification difficult. Such acts of concealment included removing the clothes and any identifying artifacts, and physically striking the face into disfigurement. The location of the disposal of the body was also very purposeful, as the victim was placed in an abandoned mechanical well which was too narrow for the body to be removed from without drastic measures. Furthermore, it was located in a remote area that few people ever visited. The police examined the crime scene for clues and found an axe at the bottom of the well, which was underneath the corpse before it had been removed. Police postulated that the murderer likely disposed of the axe in the same place as his victim. The axe was retrieved, and forensics confirmed that it was the murder weapon, although, unfortunately, this axe was the only physical evidence found at the scene. There were no fingerprints nor DNA evidence on the axe to identify who wielded it, but it still proved to be a tremendous help. This type of axe was specifically made as it was outfitted with metal reinforcements to prevent the head from falling off the handle. Only one store in Shanghai County sold this type of axe. So when the police questioned the owner, he was able to provide them with a purchase record and explained that out of the 80 that he had purchased, only 13 had been sold. And although he did not remember the name or the description of his last customer, his record showed that he sold such an axe in December of 2009, meaning that that month is the absolute earliest the murder could have happened. After further questioning the police later revised the estimate, as several had stated that around January 28th of 2010, they had seen some dark red substance near the well and on the snow. The police believed what they saw was blood, and in those statements they were able to estimate that the victim had died in January of 2010. Despite this progress, the police were still no closer to identifying the victim, let alone the killer. So, they directed their efforts to missing persons reports. 17 people had been reported missing in Shanghai County, but they were all ruled out as victims, so the police made their search province-wide. But after that failed to work, they began a national search, however, to no avail. That was until the police retraced their steps and re-examined the 17 missing locals. They found one name that sounded potentially promising. 33-year-old Wang Saiyuan was born in 1976 and operated a large chicken farm. He was a married man with 3 children. Although he went missing on March 9, 2010, and not in January, it was still the closest match, so with no other leads, the police decided to further investigate his case. According to his wife, Wong left home that day and never returned. The police would be disappointed, however, when Wong was described to them and his height and weight, as well as his physique, did not match. However, right before they were about to leave, they were told something interesting. Wong had purchased a Volkswagen Santana, which he had sent to a repair shop to get painted before his disappearance. The Santana, however, was a new vehicle and less than half a year old, and yet Wong wanted to spend a lot of money to fully repaint it. That confused his wife, and it confused investigators as well. The police went to the repair shop and questioned the employees, who stated that a man had come in to paint the vehicle red, but after the paint job was finished, the owner had never returned to pick up the car, so the employees, not wanting to keep it on their property and potentially affect their business, drove it to a foothill next to the repair shop. They soon led the police to the vehicle, which was right where they had left it. The car was in remarkably good shape, with no sign of a collision, and when they examined the vehicle by looking inside, underneath, and in the wheels, they found nothing out of place. They looked inside the trunk, but there was nothing but a few dead leaves. One of the officers, however, noticed a dark red spot in the middle of one of the leaves, which was a different shade of red than the car's paint. It took 4 attempts, but eventually a blood sample was extracted from the leaf, and it was run for DNA. Soon, the results came in, but instead of the DNA matching Wong, it instead matched the deceased corpse, meaning that whoever the body was had been in the trunk of Wong's car. It appeared to the police that they were right to look into Wong's disappearance, not because he was the victim, but instead because he was potentially the killer. The police initiated a manhunt for Wong, while investigators looked into his activities by pulling his phone records. Police found that in January of 2010, around the time of the murder, Wong had frequently contacted 2 phone numbers from Tianjin, but after the incident, all correspondence had ceased. The Shanghai authorities asked the Tianjin police to track down the phone numbers, and they soon got back to them, stating that they belonged to 2 men named Han Baoshan and Han Binli, who the police made efforts to track down, thinking that they may be Wong's accomplices. Despite the same family name, the 2 were not brothers, but still described as having a friendly relationship. The police went to Han Baoshan's house, and easily enough, that's exactly where he was. He explained that he and Han Binli were fellow villagers, and that they had gone to Shandong province to do some work for Wong, but he denied that they had ever taken part in any crime, especially not a murder. But when they went to visit Han Binli, they saw that he was not home, nor had he been home in months. The police at first thought that he may have fled with Wong, but then they uncovered some alarming but truly illuminating information. Han Binli's family had reported that he had been missing and had not been home since he had left with Han Baoshan for Shandong, with the family reporting that he had not even returned or contacted them during the Chinese Spring Festival. But this was only the beginning of their tale. Han Binli was 183 centimeters tall, 32 years old, had a burly build, and the last time his family had ever seen or heard from him was on January 24, 2010. In light of these facts, the police obtained DNA samples from his family and compared them with the corpse. They came back as a positive match, with the body in the well being identified as that of Han Binli. The police immediately brought Han Baoshan in for interrogation on July 29th, finding it more than curious that he did not seem to care nor report his good friend as missing, as he had gone to another province with him only to come back alone. Han Baoshan denied killing nor having anything to do with Han Binli's death, simply stating that Han Binli had went to work elsewhere rather than return home. But after police persisted with their interrogation and showed him Han Binli's body and Wong's phone records indicating that they both stopped making calls on January 24th, he soon broke down and confessed, but his confession only complicated the case further. In In September of 2009, the two did travel to Shandong to do work for Wang and a woman named Zhang Hongxia. That part was true, but what was this work exactly? As it turned out, they were both hired killers, with Wang paying them both 100,000 yuan to carry out a hit, and the man Wang wanted them to kill was a seemingly innocuous wreath shop owner named Zhang Binling. The two never asked why Wang wanted him dead, and instead simply got right to work. The two were also introduced to Wang by a man named Zhang Chengsheng. Zhang Hongxia and Zhang Chengsheng were also arrested and gave their own confessions. Although Han Binli and Han Baoshan did not ask for the reason behind the hit, Sheng Hongxiao and Jing Chengxiang would explain to the police that Wang was actually good friends with Zhang Binling, who would regularly contribute money to Wang's chicken farm. However, unbeknownst to Binling, Wang was having an affair with his wife, Zhang Hongxiao. It is said that the husband and wife did not get along, and Zhang Hongxiao even accused her husband of being a domestic abuser. Eventually, Zhang Hongxiao wanted to divorce her husband, but did not know how to do it the legal way. However, she knew that if she and Wang had killed the husband directly, they would almost certainly be caught, so they decided to engage in a murder-for-hire plot. The two hired killers would soon come to find that this humble wreath shop owner would be a harder target to get rid of than they would ever have predicted. Their first plan was to simply stage a car accident, and in the process followed him, but because of the location of his parking spot and its proximity to the roadside and the narrow space with which it was parked near, they were unable to start up their vehicle to run him down. And to complicate matters further, Zhang Binling soon found out that he was being followed, so he began to go to great efforts to be in public places. This meant that the two killers could not strike or shoot him, either with the guns or the axe that they had procured. The two had help though, as Wang's accomplice, Zhang Hongxiao, was also the target's wife, and therefore would covertly be able to inform the killers about his whereabouts and activities. Later, Wang would tell them to change their strategy. In October of 2009, the two made a bomb and stealthily loaded it into Zhang Binling's car, with the bomb being set on a timer to explode with just him inside. While the bomb worked, it did not kill the target, as Zhang Binling, when in his car that day, realized that he had forgotten to buy water, so he went back into the store to buy some, and from inside the store, he watched as his vehicle exploded outside. Both killers now had to try again, and they attempted to do so again using a bomb. However, this time, instead of a bomb set to a timer, it would be a remotely detonated bomb. In November of 2009, they placed another explosive in Zhang Binling's car, but this trick was also foiled because Zhang discovered the bomb and quickly got rid of it before it could explode. The two would-be assassins were becoming desperate and planned to simply strike him with an axe, but they were unable to locate him when attempting to execute this plan. Zhang Binling, as mentioned, was an unremarkable man by all accords. He simply owned a small wreath shop, he did not have many social relationships, and he had no bodyguards to protect him, and yet these two assassins could not succeed in killing him. Understandably, Zhang Binling was feeling quite paranoid at this point and told his sister about all that had been going on. His sister asked if he had offended anybody or had made any business rivals, but Zhang could not think of anybody who would have had such an intense hatred for him. Calling the police was suggested, but the two decided against this, as Zhang Binling had never been injured, and as of yet, there was no real evidence of a crime. As the bombs could not be located, the police were generally not the best at preemptive protective measures, so Zhang simply continued his life, but under increased vigilance. Wang was unhappy with the turn of events, as he had already spent upwards of 40,000 won on the plot, as the two killers asked for not only wages, but also room and board on top of expenses. And after months of payment and zero progress, Zhang Binling was not even injured, let alone dead. The two killers had begun trying to extort Wang, threatening that they could expose his plan to have Zhang Bingling murdered and the fact that he was an adulterer on top of things, who had an affair with his friend's wife. So Wang relented and increased their payment to up to 140,000 won for the killing of Bin Ling. Wang decided to come up with a plan in order to sow conflict between the two. If the partners turned on each other, it would help deal with the extortion issue. So Wang contacted each man individually and gave them a new offer, telling them that if they killed their partner in crime, they would get the full reward that had been promised for killing the man, rather than having to split it between one another. The two, unbeknownst to each other, agreed, as due to the illegality of what they were doing and the money at stake, they worried that one may reveal the other's secret. Additionally, they knew that going back to their families empty-handed was not an option, and questioned whether the other would turn on them before they had the chance to do so. On January 24th, 2010, while Wang and Shang Hongxiao were at home enjoying some tea, the killers met up in private, under the guise of discussing further plans to kill Zhang Binling. However, the two began to fight, and Hong Baoshan struck Han Binli with the axe that he had brought originally to kill Zhang Binling. The winner of the fight, Han Baoshan, then called his boss, Wang, to tell him of the news. Wang was surprised to hear that it was Baoshan that won, as he was the weaker of the two, but in order to help him dispose of the body, Wang drove to the scene with his truck, and they loaded Binli's body into the vehicle to drive to the well, which Wang already knew of due to being a local. They took off all of Han Binli's clothes and dumped him into the well, head first, and afterwards dropped the axe into the well along with him. The two then incinerated his clothing. Han Baoshan was paid his 140,000 won, and the next day he returned to Tianjin. Although far more convoluted than they had been expecting, police investigators had solved the case, with the exception that Wang was still at large. The trial for Han Baoshan, Zhang Hongxiao, and Zhang Chengxiang began in early 2011, and Zhang Hongxiao was sentenced to 11 years imprisonment. Zhang Chengxiang's sentence is unknown, and Han Baoshan was sentenced to death. However, his death sentence was given 2 years reprieve so that he could be turned over to a higher court for approval, as is procedure with all death sentences in China. The higher court did approve the sentence, but because it was a death sentence with reprieve, Han Baoshan was able to practice good behavior, or positive deeds, in order to reduce the sentence to life imprisonment, which he was able to do in 2015. Wang remained on the run, with seemingly no leads as to his location. With 0 sightings of him, and his bank cards, photo IDs, and phone cards having been unused since January of 2010, police were unable to track down any further explanation as to his whereabouts. Upon interviews with friends and family, in addition to business partners, all stated that they had not had contact with Wang since late 2009 or early 2010. In October of 2012, police reviewed Wang's phone records and found a text message which had been previously overlooked. The message was sent to all of his family members and relatives and said, quote, "Brother, I went to hide my debts and I will come back in 2 years." However, the text was not written in the local accent and did not use the appropriate language customs, meaning that the text was sent by somebody else, pretending to be Wang. Further investigations also revealed that Wang's chicken farm owed over 1 million won in debts. With this in mind, the police started to wonder if, in another twist of fate, Wang may have actually become a victim of crime as well. While Wang did have considerable debts, police theorized that debt alone would not cause Wang to flee, as nobody even came to collect on those debts and he was still making a profit from his farm. Wang was even able to purchase a new car under a car loan. If Wang was already dead, the police had a likely suspect, so they visited Han Baoshan in prison and interrogated him, but he denied killing Wang, stating that he had never returned to Shandong. After heading back to Tianjin, the police soon verified this information and ruled him out as a suspect. Police noted that the day that Wang disappeared was an especially brutal one weather-wise, as there was heavy snowfall and severe fog, a rare occurrence in the area. The police visited Zhang Hongxiao in prison, but she refused to speak to them, believing that they were trying to use her to arrest Wang. But when police explained that Wang may be deceased and presented their evidence, Zhang Hongxiao explained that Wang had fled because he was worried about Han Binli's body being found. She explained that after the disappearance, she had called Wang's brother and he had come over to help at the farm. Zhang Hongxiao then told police that they should be investigating her husband, Zhang Binling, as the murderer. When police were able to secure Wang's mobile phone records, they learned that, despite disappearing in March, his mobile phone was used a single time in June. And while the phone may have possibly been used by an outsider as a mistake, the person who used the phone was named Sun Monmu. But due to her stature and physique being different than Wang's, the police had held off on questioning her and instead went to question Zhang Binling. Zhang Binling was a likely suspect, one that the police thought might have known about Wang's deaths, and might have found out about the affair and murder plot. When questioned, Zhang Binling denied any involvement, but said something that piqued investigators' curiosity when referring to Wang and Han Baoshan. He said, quote, "His way of killing was so stupid. How could he have thought of throwing the body there? If it were me, I would have dragged them to the cremation ground and burnt them to ashes so that you can't find them." The police were initially questioning Zhang Beiling as a formality, but upon hearing his assertions, he became their number one suspect. While Zhang Beiling was a wreath shop owner, he also handled several other affairs in the village, such as funeral ceremonies, handling death certificates, and cremations. But to cremate a corpse in China, one needs to abide by strict guidelines. A hospital needs to issue a death certificate, and the village committee needs to issue a relevant application. If the death is suspicious in any way, the police also need to approve. All the bodies that had been cremated locally abided by said procedures, so police began to check neighboring counties and cities, looking at their cremation records for March of 2010. They found that at a funeral home in Laoling, there was a photocopied driver's license of a corpse transported named Zhang Jiaok, with the photo looking very similar to Zhang Beiling. Despite the possible fake name, the corpse was very much a real person, and the cremation had been conducted under proper procedures. However, they took Zhang Jiaok's fingerprints, which the funeral home had on file, and also Zhang Jiaok's handwriting samples, and compared them to Zhang Beiling's. They were a match. The police noticed something odd when comparing the records, with one name appearing twice that belonged to somebody named Ding Moja, a 78-year-old man who was cremated in Shanghai County's funeral home on November 12, 2009. However, strangely enough, he would be cremated a second time in Laoling in 2010. When Ding's family was called, they confirmed that he had been cremated once in 2009. It would appear that his name was used to cover up the destruction of Wang's body. The police were completely baffled at the turn of events, as they were now investigating the victim for the murder of the suspect. Although certainly suspicious, the police did not arrest Zhang Beiling, as they could not prove that Wang was actually dead, and they only could fault him for possessing forged documents, and still could not explain how Zhang Beiling would have gotten around the regulations to begin with. How did he burn a second body under the name of the first? The police would soon catch a break when they questioned the owner of an auto parts store, named Tian Momu, who stated that on March 9, 2010, Zhang Beiling's car had broken down, and the mechanic was called in to help. When he arrived at the scene, there were two occupants in the vehicle, one being Zhang Beiling and the other being Wang, meaning that Zhang Beiling may have been the last person to see Wang alive. The police believed that the murder took place near the store where Zhang Beiling ran his funeral home, but by the time they realized its proximity, it was nearing 2012, and Zhang Beiling's lease on the building had expired in October of 2010. In the meantime, the building had gone through several different owners, along with many renovations, meaning that in all likelihood, no evidence was left remaining. Or so they thought. Zhang Beiling owned a big wooden sofa chair which he kept in his funeral home. Zhang Beiling insisted that he carry it only on his own, citing how heavy it was. Police made another visit to the prison in order to question Zhang Hengxiao, who said that one day she had found that a cushion of the couch was gone, and Zhang Beiling stated that it had been dirty, so he simply threw it away, which was unusual for him due to his poverty and the ruralness of the area in which he was located. Most people would attempt to wash and reuse the item rather than simply getting rid of it. Feeling that there was likely evidence present on the chair, police began looking for the item, and it was found easily in the possession of Zhang Beiling at his home. Police cleaned the dust off the chair and began examining it, but found nothing. So they began removing the wooden slats to see if any evidence was left behind. This gambit paid off as police discovered traces of dried blood and extracted DNA samples from them, with the result confirming the blood belonged to Wang. The police also discovered a driver's license underneath the chair and learned that Zhang Jiaok wasn't an alias, but actually a real person, whose identity Zhang Beiling had stolen. Zhang Beiling was arrested and confessed. The police also learned that Sun Maomu was the girlfriend of Zhang Beiling's accomplice, whom he named as Li Wenxi. According to his and Li's confession, he and Zhang Hengxiao often fought, and after a particularly bad fight, she ran away from the home and did not come back. Worried, he recalls that he went to the telecom company to request his wife's call history, and in doing so found out about all the calls that she had made to Wang. Upon learning of this affair, he was enraged. He also realized that this explained why his phone bill had been unusually high in the past few months. On March 9th of 2010, he invited Wang to his store for an explanation on the calls, which is where they were going to go when his car broke down. Once there, along with Li, he demanded why he had been seducing his wife, which resulted in an altercation. The two forced Wang onto the sofa chair and hit him with a wooden stick until Wang fell unconscious. They then took him to the back room in order to wait for him to regain consciousness. But when he never did, they realized that they had inadvertently killed him. They then panicked and realized that they had to rid themselves of the body, so Zhang Beiling went to the village committee in order to explain that he had lost the most recent death certificate for the body that he had and needed it replaced, so he was issued a blank certificate, which he then filled in with Ding Mojia's information. He then drove to Laoling with Wang's body in order to cremate it under a false identity. Once at the funeral home, Beiling presented the forged certificate to the staff, who believed it was legitimate, and agreed to let them cremate the body. Before throwing his ashes off the Shunhao Bridge and into the Mijia River, Beiling sent a fake text message as Wang, stating that he had fled due to his debts. Zhang Beiling stated that he did not know about the plot to have him killed at the time and had felt guilty about what he had done, but when police notified him of the murder-for-hire plot and explained that his wife was arrested for putting a hit on him, with Wang as her partner, he explained that all of his guilt and remorse instantly disappeared. Zhang Beiling and Li were both put on trial, and on April 25, 2014, they were both found guilty of intentional homicide. Zhang Beiling was sentenced to life imprisonment, while Li was given a sentence of 9 years. This convoluted and twisted tale of events would eventually lead to stricter regulations regarding the cremation of bodies and increased scrutiny of death certificates in the area.